It's a real honor for me to address you this morning, and thank you for coming so early in the morning. So I came to Australia about more than 35 years ago from New Delhi with 17 million people to a place called Karratha, which had like 1,000 people. And my first challenge was, where are all the people? So from that shaky start, I kind of got over that. So I'm here to tell you about artificial intelligence and a little bit about the research that we have done in the past 25 years or so. So first, what is artificial intelligence? And as the name implies, it's a loose term that broadly defines how are we going to get machines to behave more like humans? How are we going to get them to partner us in tasks? How are we going to get them to take instructions? How are we going to get them to help us in decision support, more like a human rather than as an algorithm? So that's the rough goal that we're working towards. And we haven't made too much progress on many of the complex tasks, but where we have made a lot of progress is in this area of pattern recognition and machine learning, and I happen to be working in this field for about 25 years now. So what I'd like to share with you this morning is really two of the stories that I have about how we collaborated with our partners and industry collaborations and how that became valuable products. So the first one starts with the London bombing. And at that point in time, I was working with a Perth-based company called DTI. And when the London bombing happened, the police asked only one question: did the bomber get off the bus? And nobody could answer that question, if you remember, for about 2 weeks, till the mother of the bomber called the police. Now, actually, they could have answered the question because there were other buses that were overlooking this particular bus, and there were cameras on board that bus. There were several things that people didn't know. One is that the cameras were recording. Some of the cameras were faulty, and of course, no one knew how to get access to that footage. So from this, we understood there was one problem that we could solve immediately for DTI, which is how do you make sure that all these cameras that they put on these buses are actually operational? And that was one piece of technology we transferred to them. But a bigger problem that came out of that was there were thousands of cameras around London at that time. You couldn't drive anywhere without being in a camera. But where was this footage going? Actually nowhere. No one's actually watching it. It was just like, there's a camera. So we decided that we might have a look at the large-scale surveillance problem in cities. And we just had this conversation with the people at DTI, and we realized there was a front-facing camera on each bus. And I remember still asking him, what's that front-facing camera for? And he goes, oh, nothing really, just for the insurance guy. But actually, that's an asset, because if you imagine there's a front-facing camera that's moving right through your city, and you have a fleet of cameras, you now have continuous footage of your city through this fleet, almost continuous footage. So what we did is we developed a concept called virtual observer, which essentially meant that you could create a virtual camera anywhere on this network, this fleet of buses, and take out the footage. So it's like having a virtual camera which stitches together the footage from each of these individual buses that have passed that location in that particular time. And this virtual observer became a very important product in the suite of DTI. And my next example comes from an interaction we had with the Perth Transport Company that I was working with. So again, they had thousands of cameras, and this time it was being streamed into a control center. And I went to visit them at this center, and I remember looking that there was a guard, there were 30,000 cameras, and there were 6 screens on which he was watching the footage. And I asked him, how do you know which camera you're supposed to look at? And I still remember his look as he turned to me in a very contemptuous manner and said, of course I know which one to look at. But clearly he doesn't know. There's 30,000 cameras. How does he know which one's going wrong, right? So at that moment, we realized that there was a deeper problem to solve. There are all these sensors that are capturing data. There's no one to monitor them. We just don't have the resources to monitor them. So you need to create some machine learning technology that will learn normal. It learns from normal. It learns the model for normal and is able to flag when something goes abnormal. So our solution for this problem was really a blank screen where nothing happens, and it's only when a camera goes abnormal that it flashes up that piece of video onto that screen. And this then became a startup company that now is operating worldwide with products all over the world. So I guess from these two examples, the message that I'd like to share is that when industry and academia start working together, often you start talking about the simplest problems that we can see can be solved. But I think that the high value problems really comes from having deeper conversation about the business and seeing what doesn't work. Like, what is it that is simply not working? And often we can find solutions to those kind of problems, and that's what creates these kind of new companies and new products and very high-value solutions. So we, of course, have this institute now, and I invite you to have conversations with us, and I hope that it will lead to many more partnerships. Thank you.